I just get one more round of applause for the team of my peers that has put in so many hours for this? All right, so let's ruin Thanksgiving and talk about religion and politics. God is not a Republican or a Democrat. The Christian social justice organization Sojourners has gained a lot of popularity in the last several years since they started selling this as a bumper sticker. And it's really not that hard to see why. God does not belong to a political party, let alone an American political party. And we live in a country that from its inception has made an effort to not establish respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And yet, if you examine the history of American political rhetoric, God's plan for the United States has always been a part of our discourse. People disagree on what that plan actually is. And unfortunately, God continues to divide us. God is used as a campaign tactic. God is used in the inaugural address. God is at the center of our major policy debates. God is even the reason why some people run for office in the first place. So, last fall, Professor Gene Gallagher sends my Religion in the United States class this study. It shows the growth of the religiously unaffiliated in America, and as you can see, the growth of the agnostics and atheists in the country has remained relatively low, and yet there has been a 5% increase in nothing in particular. 5% increase in 5 years, from 2007 to 2012, the number of people in the United States that do not identify with any specific religious church or institution has grown. So, I'm reading through this report, and I get stuck on one line in the entire thing. And that is, in 2008, the religiously unaffiliated people, by the way, they're calling them nuns, and not the nuns you're probably thinking of. We're talking about N-O-N-E-S. These are religiously unaffiliated people. You might look at this kind of a survey and say, wow, Americans are becoming increasingly atheist. We're abandoning the faith in the very existence of God. Nothing could be further from the truth. The majority of nuns believe in God. The majority of nuns think that religion is a positive thing for people. And yet, they are rejecting affiliation. 88% of them do not think that they need a religious institution to identify who they are. So Professor Eugene Gallagher sends out this study, and I get caught on one line in the entire thing. And that is, in 2008, the religious nuns voted just as heavily for Barack Obama as white evangelicals did for John McCain. So I say to myself, wait a second, there's a political component to all of this, and the answer is yes. Because today, religious nuns are twice as likely to describe themselves as politically liberal than as conservative. 73% of them support marriage equality. 72% support a woman's right to choose. And so when you keep that in mind, it becomes a little clearer as to why so many of them would be less inclined to vote for a candidate who vows to protect the sanctity of life and honor the institution of marriage by way of America's first liberty, the freedom of religion. So 2012 rolls along, and the Democratic Party markets itself as the party of social reform, more than any other year. We will get you marriage equality. We will fight for that woman's right to choose. And so when you keep those historic endorsements in mind, it becomes a little clearer as to why the religious nuns have become literally almost a quarter of all Democratic voters. That is bigger than white Catholics at 13%, white mainline Protestants at 14%, black Protestant at 16%, 24% of religiously unaffiliated vote Democratic. That becomes a little bit easier to understand, a little easier to grasp when you keep in mind what many pundits have argued was absolutely crucial to President Obama's two national victories, and that's the youth. News show, talk shows, media outlets, pundits, everyone from Glenn Beck to Rachel Maddow to Jon Stewart love to talk about this. My generation absolutely loves Barack Obama. In 2008, 66% of voters between the ages of 18 and 29 voted for the president. In 2012, a smaller but still impressive 60% voted for the president. So keep that statistic in mind, keep that vast majority in mind when you see how much more my generation contributes to the religiously unaffiliated. 1/3 of adults under 30 today do not identify with a religious institution. And that is greater than our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation. And so I can't stress these next 2 points enough. Not only is my generation, the generation of the majority of people sitting in this very room, not only are we less religious than our elders today, but we are also less religious than any generation on record. We are less inclined to make religion a part of our identity. So, my argument is that if the president needed so much of the youth vote to win, and this youth is becoming increasingly less religious, then I think it's safe to say that the political opinions of the religiously unaffiliated are starting to gain some traction. And if you don't believe me, just look at the exit polling data, if it ever loads. In Ohio, Obama loses Protestants by 3, Catholics by 11, but he wins the Nuns by 47 points. In Virginia, Obama loses Protestants by 9, Catholics by 10, but he wins 76% of the Nuns. In Florida, Obama loses Protestants by 16 points, Catholics by 5. He captures 72% of the Nuns. Similar results occur in New Hampshire, in Michigan, many of the key swing states of 2012 that pushed President Obama past 270 electoral votes. And this is where it gets a little ironic, because if you think of the Nuns as a religious coalition, then they were the president's strongest religious coalition in his re-election campaign. The Nuns, however, are not a religious institution. They are not a funded, forceful front that set out to elect the Democratic president in 2012. Religiously unaffiliated refers to militant atheists. It refers to people who do not have a particular faith and are looking to find one. It refers to people who just don't care. And so, I'm not saying that the Nuns are taking over national politics, and I'm not saying that in 5 years they will be 25%. I'm not saying that in 10 years they'll be at 30%. I'm not saying that if the Democratic Party stays committed to marriage equality and abortion rights as their major points of rhetoric, then they will keep the White House in 2016 or 2020 or 24, especially if Republican lawmakers continue to realize the enormous political costs of staying stubborn on such fundamental issues. What I am saying is that the religiously unaffiliated and their voting patterns show for me a shift, or more importantly, an additional definition of what it means to have a relationship with the divine in this country. And at the very least, these people are looking for political leaders who will make them feel just as American as anybody else. For so long we've had this source of identity in saying things like, I am Jewish, I am Catholic, I am an atheist. But as you've seen, there are a small but growing number of individuals in this country who are less comfortable putting a name, a face, and a plan on God. And that's exactly why I wanted to come and talk here today, because when you are standing on the shoulders of giants, you can very well get a sense of the future. You can follow the power, and you can be comforted by answers that are fed to you. Whatever questions you might have don't need to be answered, because the giant will take care of everything. But my question is, when you're standing on the shoulders of giants, can you see their feet of clay? Can you see the seeds of their destruction? Can you question? Can you critique? Can you remain hungry for answers when the ones fed to you are no longer enough? Because we have a whole assortment of issues to solve in this country, from unemployment, 1 in 5 children is born into poverty every single day, climate change, please do not even get me started on campaign finance reform. But the solutions can begin with whom we put in office. Amy was talking earlier about how problems don't get solved just by legislation. It calls for a revolution of thought. Spiritual individuals can thrive within an open and democratic society without a religious institution. It's common sense, or at least Thomas Paine thought so, when he said that it is the will of the Almighty that there be a diversity of religious opinions among us. In the American Revolutionary times, that sentiment sought to fulfill the principles of an overwhelmingly Christian people. And the time has passed, and the majority is continuing to pass, but it remains the duty of we the people, not only to recognize change to a society much more diverse than any of the founders could have possibly imagined, but also to elect leaders who we think can make us feel American just as anybody else. Thank you.